Welcome to the show, Natalie. How you going?
Hi, Tom. I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, really good. I was just telling you how my son, I just got my son out the door to daycare with a Spider-Man suit on, with the mask dropping down over his face. So yeah, I've had a good start to the day. Good morning, bit rushed, but yeah, here we are.
The joy of the parenting juggle. My daughter's got casual day today, and all I can say is thank goodness they wear a uniform every day to school because trying to juggle what to wear, and I'm talking about an 8-year-old here too. It starts
Oh wow.
early, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, very interesting, very interesting times with the kiddies. Natalie, thanks so much for joining us. I'm very interested in this topic. I am almost 40. I'm turning 40 this year, and in my circle of friends, including females, the topic of perimenopause, especially, is starting to come up. It's starting to come up I guess, from a place of some of our friends and my wife noticing just different changes in maybe it's their body or their mental health, perhaps those types of things. And naturally, it's kind of like, gee, am I going into menopause or perimenopause early? Those types of things. So that probably leads them to a Google search and a freak out moment. And then lots of conversations, and then maybe some more googling, or perhaps landing on a podcast like yours, listening about the different stories. And I feel like, today we're going to be talking about menopause, and you'll be schooling me hopefully on this topic, because I'm interested, and to be honest, would be an amateur in knowing the ins and outs of it. So that's where you come into it. So I thought maybe a good place to start, Natalie, is let's just talk, what is menopause? I know that's a really basic one for you, but let's start there.
And it's really just about starting. And if I can just add, I love that perimenopause is the word that your friends and wife are using, because
Yes.
it wasn't so long ago where we would get blank looks from women when we mentioned the word perimenopause, because a lot of people didn't know that there was this phase called perimenopause. We just talk about menopause, and actually menopause is that sort of umbrella term that really signifies a whole process that we go through. Whenever I talk about perimenopause and menopause, I love to just start with this idea, or the fact that it is not a medical condition or an illness, and a very natural phase of life that every single woman will experience. Whether we want to admit to it or not, it is something that we will all experience. And interestingly, and I love that women share their stories around perimenopause and menopause, but every single woman's experience of this phase will be completely unique to her. Very much like her own fingerprint, every single woman will have her own experience. But of course, we can share in the experience and share in the feelings, and that's really important. So perimenopause is that transition to menopause, and it can start in your mid to or early to mid 40s. Even for some women, it can start from your mid to late 30s. And what we find and hear is that women actually, even if they're not in that phase, they start to experience whispers and changes in their body, just like you suggested. And funnily, I'm 41, and I'm not in perimenopause, but I'm feeling changes. Things are definitely changing throughout my monthly cycle. And that's the greatest awareness that we can have as women, is know our bodies before we come into the phase, and recognize those changes. So perimenopause is that phase where our hormones start to change. And some people have likened perimenopause to our second puberty. So just like in our teenage years where we go through puberty, our hormones ramp up. When we go through perimenopause, our hormones start to wind down, and that's particularly estrogen and progesterone. And perimenopause is where all the symptoms really happen. And there's about 30 to 35 symptoms that women can experience,
Wow.
ranging from anxiety to depression, hot flushes, insomnia, mood changes, weight gain. There's a whole plethora. And yes, we can get caught in the doom and gloom of these symptoms and how impactful they are. But they're also signs from our body that things are changing, and we can become aware through our symptoms as to what's actually happening in our body. Understanding the what and the why of perimenopause and menopause is really critical to our level of acceptance and awareness. So we go through this phase, which could last 5 to 8 years, even for some people could last up to 10, even longer. And it's the lead into menopause. Now, menopause is 1 day only. And menopause marks let's say, the anniversary where a woman hasn't had her period for 12 months consecutively.
Wow.
So for 12 months, we haven't had a period. That next day is our menopause day. After that 1 day of menopause, we are then postmenopausal. And that 1 day of menopause on average happens for women around 51. But look, many conversations, women in their mid, even to late 50s still haven't had that 1 day of menopause. So it comes back down to, again, that whole unique experience to women and very different, but understanding the age range that can happen, the changes that we experience goes a long way to us really, navigating this phase of life.
Wow, you've just dropped so much great info there, and all new to me. That's really interesting about menopause day, or that sort of, that I thought it was a process later, as in like similar to perimenopause, where you go through it, maybe for 6 to 12 months or something like that. And I guess my obviously I'm a male, and my viewing of this in my mum or something was like, oh, bit of hot flushes and I feel hot, and that's really all the extent that was discussed or opened up about at that point in time. It sounds like it's, and you mentioned perimenopause and actually using that as language, like that, to be honest, that word or that phrase and that concept, if you like, is something that I've only really known about in the last few years. So is it now that what's happened is everyone just started talking a lot more about it, or opening up around perimenopause specifically, or is it just that we're learning more, or is it people more opening up more?
Yeah, look, probably a bit of both. When we started this work a few years ago, there wasn't a lot of language. There wasn't a lot of conversation about it. And, we would speak to a lot of people, even to businesses, and we would get shot down quite quickly. And, the comment was, oh, I can't talk about that taboo topic. We can't talk about it. And women, whisper, I mean, menopause. And we saw a little bit of that today, but there's really been a great shift, and the UK have really paved the way for a lot of countries, and there's actually some commentary around that they are about 5 to 10 years ahead of us when it comes to menopause awareness and education. But they're also setting a precedence for us and showing us what is actually possible here and in other countries too. So they've played a huge part, and then also in the US are doing more and more as well, and then just a lot of celebrities have started talking about menopause, and of course that allows us to open up the conversation, and people, they're our role models. Let's say a lot of people look at celebrities as role models, and that helps to really open the conversation. But then also, I think there's a shift in, particularly from COVID in the last few years, around coming into true health and well-being, and particularly in the workplace. And being seen as a human, being seen as the experiences and the life phases that we go through. And this is another life phase that we're not talking about, but I feel a lot of people, particularly women, are wanting to talk about it and wanting to know about it, because there is so much confusion. And women often say to us, I feel like I'm going crazy. Something is really wrong with me.
Yeah, I've heard that I have heard that from some other people in my network. I feel like I'm going a bit batshit crazy. Was the actual phrase? Excuse the French there. I wonder as well, like if we look at the workplace specifically, we're talking, we've seen the huge changes in paternity leave for men. So like, the 6 months paternity leave in some of the bigger organizations, I guess acknowledging now a little bit more around, people's health and their journey, and maybe what their interests and family, that kind of thing. What is, you mentioned the UK, what is best practice in this space, in workplaces, or is it, or around health promotion, specifically the UK? What have they done?
Yeah, so the UK, there's some really great stats, and I'm happy to share a few stats. And
Hmm.
probably the most alarming is that 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce as a result of the symptoms. Not just the symptoms, but feeling like they've got no support, and also feeling like I just can't do this anymore. And fatigue and exhaustion really just, plays a huge part in women making that decision. But they're also describing women as the fastest, menopausal women as the fastest workforce demographic. So there's this real drive of women in that 40 plus. And when you look at women's career life cycles, there's that similar theme that in that 40 plus bracket and beyond, women are raring to go back in their career, build on the foundations they had, perhaps if they had children prior to that, and ready to climb the ladder and get to that ambitious career stage that they want to, but then that it's been intersected with this phase of life too. So some of the things the UK have done is really helped to start the conversation. And we take a similar approach here that a lot of workplaces don't know where to go or how to start. And it's really just starting that conversation, much like we've seen with other topics, which were slanted with a taboo lens.
Mm.
Just using the word menopause or
Yes. Yep.
perimenopause or even women's health, and introducing that into the workplace. That initial education is really critical. So definitely seeing that across the UK. And then that's starting to morph into more programs, having menopause champions within the workplace as well, setting up support groups, and then right through to policy as well, and workplaces introducing menstrual and menopause policies. And then also, they've taken it up as high as government too. And there was actually some conversation and legislation put forward to the UK government just a few weeks ago, which wasn't passed. But what that highlighted was they understood that there's a need, not sure what that looks like just yet, but also highlighted that this topic and this phase of life needs to come through from the bottom, from ground level, and
Mm.
that's where businesses play a really big important role, and that's definitely shown through the work in the UK.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? And I think with workplaces now, they've certainly more interested in supporting people in a holistic manner, as you said, around in a post-COVID world. And we've talked women, women's health, men's health have all gotten their time in the sun over the last 10 years or decade. But this feels like it's sort of the final, or one of the last sort of major taboo, or not taboo topics, but considered taboo topics in workplaces that could be the next one in the firing line for workplaces to really be be aware of, but then actually have a policy or a promotion or a awareness program perhaps around it. When you go into workplaces, Nat, and do these types of workshops or programs, where do you start? Is it simply the conversation? Is it is it online, or is it getting people into a group sort of environment? How does it work?
Yeah, and you're completely spot on in terms of those past, taboo topics in inverted commas, and we
Mm.
take a lot of comfort from those, that we've seen that evolution across those topics, and you're so right that yes, this is, and we often say this is really the last
Yeah.
topic that we have not spoken about, and we absolutely need to. So when we head into workplaces and even just have that initial conversation without doing any of the work, it's really, as I said before, starting that conversation. And how do you start that conversation? We find that themed days, so days such as International Women's Day or Women's Health Week, even World Menopause Day, serves as a really great start to bring that awareness, because there is that level of uncomfortableness for the business itself, but also for some women too. And we
Yes.
appreciate that, we've got to have empathy across both, because no one knows how to broach this within the workplace. So themed days serve as a really great starting point. But then also just starting the conversation and really bringing that initial education. And that's even, sharing what I shared with you initially around what perimenopause and menopause is. We call them aha moments, that they're aha moments, and it's like, oh wow, that's amazing information. So just having that the why women go through it, again, is really critical to help support that acceptance and awareness. And then from there, once we've got that education for women and also for men, that's when we can start talking about, okay, what does ongoing support look like? Because we're well aware of this phase. We understand what might be happening. Now, what does that look like? And unfortunately for a lot of women, because they don't know too much about this phase or know what's actually going on with their body, they can't communicate what support they need until they've had that education too. So then that's when we would look at such things as longer programs, even coaching one-on-one or group coaching support, depending on what that looks like for individual women. But then also right through to what does that look like for leaders and managers within the business? Because there's got to be some courageous conversations that take place. And what's really important is that woman's initial interaction with her manager or her peer is really critical, because that immediate response that she gets back from her manager or her peer is really going to set the tone around how comfortable she feels, how safe she feels to talk about it, and really whether she feels like she can actually stay in the workplace too. So that whole psychological safety piece is a really critical component too. So yeah, it goes from really starting using the word, using the language, broadening out to that education, and then what does that look like from an ongoing support perspective? And then maybe down the track it becomes policy, or how do we then embed that into existing health and wellbeing initiatives as well?
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of potential for a policy down the track, perhaps mirroring the UK example that you spoke of. I mean, if you think about the different types of leave there are now, there's some companies are doing things like leave for your pets and all this sort of stuff. You're just like, far out. What about the humans? And what you were saying right at the beginning, as in this stage, it's happening in your around your 50s, right? So like when women come, let's assume they've had children and they're back in the workforce and they're sort of really interested in getting back into career mode. They've got a decade under them, and then this happens to them. It's not very, as a bloke, that just seems a bit unfair for the women to have to go through this. And also the working population, it's just going to get, there's going to be more. I guess it's an aging population in general, but we'll be working a lot longer as well, right? So I think it seems like women are actually great contributors to the workforce. How can we support them even more? And then I guess through through COVID, the mental health became a huge topic. Leaders became more educated. All the conversation was brought right to the forefront. It really feels like there's potential here for that end policy that sort of really sticks and helps support people. But as you say, the first step is that awareness for the individuals as well, or employees in those workplaces.
It really is. And if I can add, and just talking about the numbers and the age of women. So in Australia right now, there's 6.4 million women who are aged 40 plus. And that's 25% of our population right now. So that's a huge chunk of our population who are either coming into, going through, or on the other side of that 1 day of menopause. And it's important to note too that after that 1 day of menopause, and when you become postmenopausal, the symptoms don't just stop. So women are still experiencing some type of level of symptoms and changes within their body. And, a lot of women have also spoken about experiencing symptoms in their 60s and their 70s. So it's something that we have to be aware of and manage and support for women post that 1 day of menopause, because we're living 30 or 40 years beyond that day. And as you say, we are working longer too. So, if we can pull on the experience and the skills and the passion of these women in their 50s and their 60s, amazing. But let's support them and see this as a phase that's really critical to women and their longevity and healthy aging too.
Yeah, good point. Healthy aging. Natalie, I'm going to ask you maybe it's a dumb question, but can you, as a woman, as you go through this stage or you notice the symptoms, are there any tests that you could do to determine where you're at with your hormone levels or those changes? Is there anything that a GP can help you with to help assess you, or is it sort of vague and grey as it sounds?
Yeah, it is a bit vague and grey. And of course, there's no dumb questions. And this is a question we get asked very often, actually. And
Yeah.
look, there isn't a test so much. There is some testing that you can do, and really that's really through some blood work. And
Yes.
I to be honest, I'm not, because I'm not part of that, the medical side of things too much. I
Yeah.
don't know too much about it, but what I do understand is that you could test at one time in your cycle and it might come back and have some certain results and show that maybe you are in perimenopause, but then you could test at a different time of your cycle and you could get completely different results. So it is very grey. This is where the education for women before they come into this phase, and this is part of what we focus on too, is women understanding their menstrual cycles and the phases of each menstrual cycle, and knowing their body is really important, because it's through that awareness of your body and tracking your cycles and your moods and your energy and everything that then helps you to identify when you do start to feel changes. And that's probably the greatest test as women that we can have. But also when we come into perimenopause, one of the first signs that we experience is changes to our periods, our menstrual cycles. So we might be quite regular, 28 days is sort of the pinnacle.
Yep.
But then we might push out to 40 days or 50 days, and then the next month it might only be 2 weeks. So that's probably the first sign. So for us, again, being able to track and know our cycles is really critical to identify those changes.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thanks. And I thought that was a dumb question, but it didn't sound as dumb. You answered it really well there. I think one other thought I had, Natalie, is I guess just with employee assistance programs, they've been around forever and they're in place in workplaces to really help, I guess, with predominantly mental health type issues or workplace issues. Is there and I'm assuming that there's not much perhaps knowledge within EAPs for around menopause. I could be wrong. Is there a role there for that type of service to be enhanced through menopause education as well, or awareness?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I have to say, and of course, this is not dogging the medical profession either, but there's actually not a lot of menopause education across GPs. And that's part of women's frustration, because they'll go and see their GP, but their GP has had very little or no education around menopause. And of course, this is at no fault of theirs. It just hasn't been part of the education that the whole of society have had. So look, absolutely, I'd assume through the EAP that there wouldn't be that awareness. And, through one of the symptoms being anxiety and depression, and a huge impact on women's mental health, that a lot of people, because they're not educated in it, they wouldn't make the connection, or they wouldn't ask the question around, how are you feeling in your physical self, or in experiencing changes in your cycles, or do you feel like you're in perimenopause? And that's probably one of the missing pieces of information that we just don't gather or get. But then again, that's because we've never spoken about it, and it's something that's just never really been on anyone's radar. Which is amazing, right? It's sort of think, how could it not be? But it's just been a way of the world.
That's it. Yeah, that's why my brain's going in overdrive here. I'm like, it just feels like it's not a lot. There's no logical help there, and I guess in terms of mental health, we've gone through that phase of COVID where it's very clear what everyone knows what anxiety is, what depression looks like, and the solutions around that are all kind of there. Maybe not 100% yet, but the relationship between women in this particular age bracket, what's going on physiologically, and maybe what that leads to from a mental health perspective, seems like there's that missing link there, which is really that support network and education around it. Because as I guess going back to my original start here on this show, my anecdotal story is people noticing symptoms and going, I don't know. I feel like I'm not quite. I don't know if I feel quite right. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. So, Anyway, Natalie, thanks so much for your time. It's been really fascinating. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to take some notes and put some more thoughts down on this because it's a super interesting topic, and we'll have to get you back on again to go into this in even more detail. But yeah, thank you, Natalie, for your time.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about this topic, and can I say, particularly with men as well, because if there's one thing I can share, this isn't just a woman's issue. This is a human issue, and something that is going to impact everyone, because we all have a woman in our life, and we can all play a really important role in supporting her.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.